So I spoke about my grandmother's father on my mother's side of the family. So now I'm going to share the story about my grandfather on my mother's father's side of the family. We called him Didi. Didi was light skinned with green eyes. My grandfather was not, and neither was his mother. So, um, I was a kid when Didi passed away. I think Didi was born in 1899, and he was still alive when I was a baby. But he died shortly after I not like shortly after I was born. I was old enough to walk. Um, but anyway, I learned later in life that Didi was not my grandfather's biological father. So while I was online looking for my grandmother's father, I also was looking for his father. But shortly before I got my test results, I learned the name of his father. And his name, I'm going to put the whole name in the video because he's not alive and I've had no contact with his family. His name was Emzel Sparks. And so my grandfather would have been a Sparks had he taken his father's last name. I reached out to it was my fifth match out of over 14,000. She shared a last name, the same last name. So I knew it was like my great grandfather's niece or something because she was testing very close to me. And she didn't look right away and I got scared and I deleted it. Um, I'm not sure that I don't know what was going on back in this period of time where people were having kids. And, well, I guess it's like today. People were having kids and not claiming them. I don't know if he didn't claim him, but my grandfather did not appear to have much of a relationship with him. Um, so anyway, I did delete the message because I don't know, chickened out. And when I got my results back, like I said, she did match me, and I was able to, from her family tree, piece together the names of people. I also looked at some census records, and I was able to see the names of his siblings, his mother and father, etc. What I learned about his father, and I had always heard about his father, but I was able to see in black and white on the ancestry documents, is that he was murdered. I believe it was in 1934 or 1930, somewhere between 1933 and 1935. I can't really remember, and I should have went and looked for the purposes of this video because I don't like giving out information that's inaccurate. It was a death certificate, and the death certificate read that he was 29 years old and that he was robbing a store, and I guess I'm assuming it was a white man. Um, Shot him in the abdomen and killed him. And so when I saw that, I was somewhat affected by that because it was like shameful to me that of committing a crime, um, that he was murdered. And so I was so upset by it. I went to work and I was speaking with one of the magistrates, and I explained to him, it was somewhat shameful. And I'm like, I can't believe he went out like that. And the magistrate, who is a 70 plus year old Caucasian man, said to me, he's like, where did your grandfather live? And I said, in Georgia. And he said, in what time period was this? And I'm like, the 1930s. And he said, it wouldn't be the first time a black man was wrongfully accused and murdered in Georgia in the 1930s. And that struck me in such a way because that is something that never crossed my mind. I never considered it. I never considered that a possibility that it was a lie. And I don't know why. I just automatically read this death certificate and took what it said at face value. And I know better. Like I completely know better. So yeah, I feel ashamed for believing it. Um, I don't know much about this man. I do know that in my some of my top matches, I matched a young lady and I reached out to her because she lives in, you know, the part of Georgia where my grandfather's from, about 20 minutes. And so later she comes back and she's like, I mentioned my grandfather, and then she says, "Oh, my grandfather had brothers." She's like, "One is named Arthur. And she's like, she starts telling me about him. She's like, they call him Jabbo, blah, blah. I'm like, that's my grandfather, girl. I loved him. That was my boy. And she's like, really? And she's like, well, I have some pictures of the great grandfather and the great great grandfather I can share with you. And so she's like, give me your email address. So she sends me her the pictures that she has, and they were beautiful. I said, then I can continue emailing her, and I said, this is so weird that you live so close to my family, yet you don't know them. I'm like, does your mother not know my aunts? They're all in the church. And I sent a picture of them from the 70s, and she never responded again. So I don't know if they did know my aunts, and I don't know what happened, but she never responded, and I didn't force it. I just left it where it was, and I got the images from her, and she was on there for a different purpose. I guess she wasn't trying to connect with family. She was looking for something specifically. And I understood that, and I got what I needed from her. And if she didn't want a relationship, that's fine. I wouldn't have minded speaking with her, but I know it's kind of weird meeting people later in life, like, hey, cuz. So I'm not really like that either. But because I'm interested in this stuff right now, I'm willing to speak with people and even meet them in person at some point. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a close sister cousin kind of relationship, because I understand they don't know me and I don't know them. When you're reaching out to these people, you don't know if this person's a criminal. You don't know if they're a shyster, even if they're related. I've had cousins I knew do stuff to me. There's one in particular that pretended to fix my car, and then I go to get the e-check in Ohio, and I failed the e-check because he disconnected my check engine light and pretended like he fixed it, and then charged my father like $600 to fix my car, and he didn't do a damn thing. So, and that was family that I knew. So it is somewhat, I guess you have to be careful and not so trusting of people just because you DNA match with them. And I'm not saying this young lady was shady in any way. She definitely, I don't know anything about her, but I can understand if she did not desire to have a relationship with me. I'm not upset about that. And that was my whole point of saying that. So anyway, yeah, I just thought that was another interesting thing I found. I had heard he was murdered, but it's like a folk tale until you actually see it in writing. And the handwriting was so crisp and I hate to say it, beautiful. It looked like I was reading something that was signed yesterday, but it was literally from the 1930s. And I kind of feel badly that this my great grandfather was a young man and he was killed and never got to live his life out. And it also gave me some insight to how my grandfather felt about white people or Caucasian people. My grandfather wasn't very trusting, and we used to try to get him to go eat at Ryan's, and he'll be like, them blanks ain't about to poison me. And I thought he was kidding. I'm like, oh, Grandpa, because I was a kid. And when I got older, I realized, I'm like, no, he wasn't playing. He meant that. There was one last thing, and I have to put this in a video before I end it. One day, my grandfather and I were driving. I don't know if we were going to Rome, Georgia, or what, but we were riding down the road, and I had to be about 11 to 13. And he points to this street, and I look, and it said Booger Hollow Road, I think. And he said, you see that street right there? And I was like, yes. And he said they used to lynch black people down that street. And I never, ever, ever forgot that. And so, like, till this day, if I'm riding or, going into Georgia and I ride past that street, I look at it and I think of him every single time. Every single time. I think of him and I remember when he pointed it out to me, and it must have really affected him because he told me as a child, and I didn't understand. I grew up in Cleveland area. I didn't understand nothing about lynching. I went to a predominantly white high school, a predominantly white school system my whole life, actually, not just high school. And I didn't see color until I was forced to see color. So, he had a whole different perspective on Caucasian people because he had different experiences with them. And it wasn't until I was older that I was able to relate to those experiences that he had. So, anyway, rest in peace to my grandfather, Arthur, and rest in peace to his father, Imzil, who we never had the privilege of knowing. And also, we learned there's another brother, my mother told me, in New York. So I'm sure some of those DNA matches in there may be related to him as well, but they probably don't even know that we exist. Because I didn't know my grandfather had brothers until 2001 at his funeral when his brother Rudolph showed up and he looked just like my grandfather. Even though they were half brothers, they looked a lot alike. I was shocked. So, anyway, that was another interesting reveal in my DNA results. Thank you for watching.